According to a new rumor, Kraven the Hunter bombed so badly that Sony are now considering selling the Spider-Man movie rights back to Marvel and Disney. Could there be any truth to this, and what would that look like? Let's find out. First things first, this comes from Scooper, My Time to Shine Hello, who has something of a mixed track record. So please put this firmly into the rumor category and treat with a massive, massive grain of salt. But for the sake of discussion, let's for the moment assume that this is one of those rumors that do pan out. What would that mean? Well, Sony has the rights to all live-action feature films featuring Spider-Man and any character that made their debut in a Spider-Man book, regardless of when. That is, for instance, why Sony have the rights to Null, even if he is a very recent creation. He appeared in Venom. Venom is a spin-off of Spider-Man. Ergo, Null is included in the Spider-Man rights. They also have the rights to a portion of the merchandise, though here there has been some back and forth in negotiations over the years. All told, a very big chunk of Marvel's total character roster are included in the Spider-Man package, which is why Sony felt confident that they could create a Spider-Man cinematic universe to rival the MCU when they were developing the Amazing Spider-Man 2 1 decade ago, and why, even after they entered a rights-sharing deal with Marvel to bring Spider-Man into the MCU, they still felt confident that they could make a Spider-Man cinematic universe even without Spider-Man. As it turned out, that was overconfidence, because they obviously couldn't. The first Venom was a solid beginning, but it's been all downhill from there, culminating with Kraven the Hunter, a movie which, after a year on the shelf, finally opened to a mere 11 million at the domestic box office, which is an utter disaster, even if the movie barely cost more than 100 million to make. That opening weekend is the audience referendum on not just Kraven the Hunter, but on Sony's overall handling of their Marvel properties, and, to a somewhat lesser extent, of even Marvel's handling of theirs this past decade. The recent floppage of Kraven, then, is obviously the basis for this rumor. If Sony can't adequately monetize the Spider-Man movie rights, why keep them? The implied reasoning here is that Marvel is willing to buy the rights back at the price point which is higher than what Sony thinks they will be able to earn on the license in the foreseeable future. So, let's steelman this. Continuing these live-action villain-centric movies is a non-starter, as outside of Venom, the failure rate is 100%. And they just concluded the Venom trilogy, and the most recent one was the least grossing, showing the very kind of declining trend no studio wants to see for their franchises. And keep in mind, Sony doesn't get to hold on to these rights for nothing. They do have to pay an annual retainer fee, so for these movies alone, the Spider-Man movie rights are clearly no longer worth keeping. But there's more to it. There is also the animated Spider-Verse films, which grossed more than $1 billion between them, so why a third one isn't already out is beyond me. Even if Sony wanted to sell the rights back to Marvel, getting that third movie in motion would only drive up the price. And on that note, the Spider-Verse films even led to a live-action Spider-Noir spin-off series, to be paid for and distributed by Amazon. So that's risk-free money for Sony right there. All they have to do is sit back and collect multi-million-dollar paychecks. So that's an argument against selling the rights back, or if they want to anyway, that'll surely drive the price up. Then there's the Spider-Man solo movies, currently in the MCU. Sony pays for their development, but they also get the bulk of the earnings, and as each and every one of them has grossed more than $1 billion, that's a very good argument for keeping the rights, but also keeping the deal with the MCU going forward. Sony don't see much money from Spider-Man's appearances in other MCU movies, but they are the best marketing money can buy for Spider-Man's solo movies. Then there's the matter of gaming, and here nothing would actually change either way. You see, Sony only owns the movie rights to Spider-Man, not the game rights. Those belong to Marvel, so here Sony has to pay a licensing fee, same as everyone else anyway. In short, gaming-wise, nothing would change whether Sony sold the movie rights back to Marvel or not. What is left then is the merchandise, where Sony now owns a piece of the pie, and that piece obviously translates to millions upon millions of dollars, as Spider-Man is one of the most merchandised characters in the world. So that is what we're dealing with here. Would Sony be willing to sell their stake in all of that for the right price? Well, given that the audience now has rejected Sony's live-action Spider-Man villain universe, the asking price for the Spider-Man movie rights will no doubt have come down. In fact, that is the only reason why this rumor exists in the first place. If Sony had actually succeeded in launching a viable live-action Spider-Man-free Spider-Man villainverse, or Venomverse as I like to call it, they'd continue their policy of never even contemplating selling the rights back for any price. But now that these movies have failed, and failed so thoroughly, the situation may be different. Different enough that while I don't necessarily believe this particular rumor, I do believe that Sony would be willing to have a conversation about selling the rights, even though that was completely off the table before. I don't quite see it happening though, because even if Sony might be willing to sell, I'm inclined to believe the price point where they would be willing to do that is so high that it wouldn't be worth it for Marvel to buy it from them. Consider this. Because of the current deal, Marvel gets to make MCU movies with Spider-Man in them and have him appear in cameos in their own movies. Sure, Sony gets the bulk of the earnings from the Spider-Man solo movies, but Marvel do get a cut as well, plus a hefty production fee, and they get all of that risk-free, as Sony pays development. All in all, not a bad deal for Marvel. As mentioned, Marvel has the gaming rights already, plus they get the bulk of Spider-Man merchandise money. So all they would be buying that they don't already have is the rights to use Spider-Man in movies even more than they already can. The right to assume all rewards, but on the flip side of that, they'd also be assuming all of the risk. On top of that, they'd gain the rights to use Spider-Man's villains, even though the best ones have already been soiled, plus the rights to Sony's cut of the merchandise. Would Marvel like to have all of that? Sure, they would like it, but when it comes to Spider-Man, face it, most of what they want, they already have. That begs the question, how much are they willing to pay for the rest? I'm guessing less than what Sony would be asking to lose their stake in Spider-Man forever. Then again, Tom Rothman was never that enamored with any superheroes to begin with, so he might be keen to see a deal happen for all we know. Still, this is just a rumor for now, and with Hollywood deal-making, you never know what might happen. But given how much Sony would stand to lose, and how little Marvel would stand to gain, I have a hard time seeing them agreeing on a price. As such, where this rumor is concerned, I remain unconvinced. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.